ladies and gentlemen. I don't know whether you can hear me out there. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Melbourne Street.
It's just coming through life.
It's been in existence for over 25 years. And I'd like to give you a very special welcome from the SQ Institute. This particular work that I'm speaking about covers the subject of transpersonal psychology. So the first word we need to understand is the word paradigm, which means a brand new lot of information for the collective masses on this planet. I want to give you an example of a paradigm so you can understand it clearly. 500 years ago, the Lords of London declared to the people of London, guess what? The earth is not flat. And all the explorers who have returned to London after their 3-year journey have shown the evidence that if you sail in one direction, you can sail right around the world. That was 500 years ago. Today, you can ask a small child, 10 or 12 years of age, what shape this planet is, and that child will tell you that we're living on a sphere. So how come we've got to identify this new paradigm? We've had to wait until 2014 or 2015 for people to understand the subject of psychology, to understand where this research began. In the early 1900s, when the war broke out, the First World War, they required an army of people with a certain level of intelligence, and so they devised what we call an IQ test, so that they learned how to use their weapons in the proper manner. A couple of years after the war was over, around about 1925, the next step from IQ was to EQ, and that was the emotion quotient, because they had a lot of men who suffered various side effects from the war that they were in. And for you to understand why we refer to this as the next step in the evolution of dimensional intelligence, I want you to draw a little graph for yourself and write IQ and EQ, and the next step is SQ for spiritual intelligence, or the soul quotient, which then leads to TQ, the transcendental quotient. Now, many people in this society have actually heard of the word transcendental quotient or transcendental because it's very powerful in the teachings of the Buddhist faith.
No, it's not, because I don't believe in that one scientific. What do you think of being identified?
So people say, oh yes, well, we know that thousands of years ago people used to worship stones and rocks and rivers and moons and gods of thunder and goddesses of the moon and everything else, and it hasn't changed much. It hasn't changed much.
Hasn't gone downwards, every worships celebrities.
Ah, very good.
Surely that doesn't amount to a wrong.
So what we really need to understand whether or not there's any urgent purpose in this new work, we need to give ourselves a little crash course in human behavioural science or psychology. One of the great forefathers of behavioural medicine was a man named Sigmund Freud, and in the 1850s, 1860s, it was Sigmund Freud who said the moment anyone stands before you to say anything at all, you're vulnerable to two states of consciousness. So I want you to pay particular attention to these couple of paragraphs because it's rewarding for you to fully, clearly understand how important it is now to grasp the idea of this new paradigm of consciousness and apply it in your immediate life, because in 20 minutes' time you will know exactly how to use your spiritual intelligence, because I'm going to teach you the 3 steps to take you from a common understanding of life to a higher form of intelligence. So Sigmund Freud said, the moment anyone stands before you to say anything at all, you're vulnerable to 2 states of consciousness. One, you may not like the look or the size or the shape or the colour of the person speaking, because they remind you of someone who caused you discomfort in the past. Secondly, you may not like the tone in their voice or the grunt or the whistle they make when they're old, like me, because that causes you to remember someone who caused you discomfort in the past. You might have had an angry old grandfather that's shouted at you, I don't know. So, first, we've got the problem with our eyes. We don't like the look of people. Secondly, we've got the problem with our ears. We don't like the sound of people, because it can actually affect us subconsciously.
Consciously, we can become aware of it subconsciously.
It's rather interesting that 100 years later, a psychologist from Spring Street here in Melbourne, a famous person throughout the world by the name of Dr. Ainsley Mears, was asked by the journalists just a few years ago, why did you close your psychological practice down and turn it into a meditation centre? Now, this man has been immortalised for his great deeds in alternative medicine. He was the man who first started the whole idea of alternative yoga as a medicine for people, and meditative techniques. So they've now built schools in this man's name, and you can often hear Dr. Rudolf Steiner's alternative schools that children can go to, where they're allowed to come to school and pick out any subject they like to practice for that day. Well, it was Dr. Ainsley Mears' reply to these journalists when they said to him, why did you close that clinic down that you'd run for 30 years and turn it into a meditation centre? And his reply was very similar to the wisdom given by Freud 100 years ago, that it had a modern extension to it. And his answer was, psychological mechanisms, that is anything verbal or visual that can disturb the natural calm of the Homo sapien, human, can be held responsible for a physiological effect, whereby the body, when maintained in an unnatural state of tension or stress, the body will overproduce cortisone, which will accelerate tumour and cancer cell growth tissue. The relief is by one means or another. Well, if you just go back over that very, very slowly, psychological mechanisms that can disturb the natural calm of the Homo sapien. I ran a clinic 15 to 16 years, I'll answer after, and people used to come to my clinic out in Kew for 15 to 16 years, and I would say to them, how many times in your day does this happen, where you're caused to tense unnecessarily? And if you knew this, as I'm explaining it to you, if you knew how dangerous it was to let yourself fall into the trap of being affected by the subconscious, by the ego, driving you to worry about things unnecessarily. So we need to understand the 2 halves of our brain. We need to understand more precisely the job that the ego has done on mankind right up until now. I want you to consider that if we're going to give you an advanced form of intelligence, that I should display to you right now how I should treat you and speak to you from this higher level. What I'm going to say to you is going to directly, immediately affect you psychophysically. You won't notice much change, but it's going to connect your heart and your soul to your own reasoning and intelligence processes. I'm going to ask you if you ever considered that the person that is standing in front of you right now is being used as an instrument of revelation to you? Because in 15 minutes' time, when I teach you how to use your spiritual intelligence, you will be able to pass this information on to someone else. And the moment you do, you will become that instrument of revelation to them. So every individual is empowered with this new paradigm of knowledge, which includes, philosophy and psychology, neuroscience, and transpersonal psychology. The word trans means going beyond the common understanding of the psyche. So I want to describe to you what this lump of stuff on your shoulders is doing and the game that's been playing. It'll only take me a couple of minutes. We're talking about the right hemisphere, where all the emotions are controlled. The left hemisphere, at least, where all the emotions are controlled, and the right hemisphere, which controls all of your thinking. This is understood as being under the control, while you're awake, of the ego. I want you to understand the nature of your ego. When you are awake, when you're asleep, you're focused on objects of attention. The ego is constantly using this moment as a means to get to the next moment. The ego, in actual fact, is constantly dissatisfied with its position in existence, and therefore very nervously jumping from one moment to the next. It'll push you till 5 o'clock in the morning on the dance floor if it thinks it's making you happy. It doesn't care how many pills and drugs you take. It's not concerned about your safety or your health. It's only concerned about making you happy. With the result that in this state of inadequacy, the ego is always in a state of reaction to everything, reacting to things instead of responding from a beautiful place of peace. And I'm going to explain to you how you'll get there. So we understand the qualities of the body-mind, constantly seeking, never satisfied, using this moment as a means to jump to the next, and always in a reactionary state. What this new work has discovered is to be credited to the founder of the SQ Institute, a man named Richard Griffiths. He's a Collins Street psychologist for 23 years. He was a London psychologist for 10 years before that. And he was in the priesthood for 9 years before he started his papers in psychology.
Which church?
He was a methylated spiritualist. So now we look at this option that you have of finding this new avenue of intelligence. During the day you're focused on objects of attention at the object pole. The twin poles of attention means that you've got an alternative. You have the subject pole of attention. And I want to tell you about the qualities that are actually located at the subject pole of attention. So in this process, you switch your identity permanently, as quickly as possible, from the object pole to the subject pole. You don't lose any control whatsoever over the body-mind. As a matter of fact, you empower yourself to have a much more powerful supervisory model to work with. That is, control completely from moment to moment over everything that's happening in front of you. Super califragilistic control. So with the power of the will you can now consider what is at the subject pole of your attention. This is often referred to as the soul mind. This knowledge is 4,000 years old, it's not new. The qualities of the soul are wisdom, joy, integrity, compassion, creativity, love and peace. These are the qualities of the soul. Now a lot of people say, oh well, I put out these qualities now and then. And that's true, you do. It's like you go to church once a week in the hope that you'll have a little connection with something that makes you feel nice, and then you go back to work and forget about it.
Actually, we go to church because we haven't.
So what we're doing with this new perspective is that you can actually use a 3-step process which will take you through a Harry Potter door, take you through a portal, so that you can move your intelligence and your consciousness to the subject pole full time. So let's have a look at this state. At the subject pole, the soul is always happy. Not using this moment as a means to jump to the next. The soul is always happy. Therefore, the soul is in a state where it's always coming from a place of peace and response to everything. Instead of reacting with stress and anxiety, it's coming from a place of peace and fulfillment. So how do we get there? Because between these two poles of attention is what you call a mechanism of attention. The people have spent hundreds of years trying to find a pathway through the traumas of life to get to this place. Many people use yoga, many people use mantras, many techniques have been developed in the psychological field. But in most cases it takes people to a dead end, or it brings them back to where they started, where they're never really fulfilled with the search. When you're located at the subject pole, you can imagine yourself as a witness of the body-mind and everything that's going on in your thinking area. You're a witness of that. You're no longer under the control of the ego. As soon as you switch to the subject pole of attention, you are plugging into direct source energy. That energy that normally flows through your head and your mind and fragments into thinking and emotions, when you move yourself to the subject pole of attention, just the fact that you are aware of it in that instant, you bypass all of the trauma of the egoic mind. All of the trauma. How do you prove this to yourself? Right now, you consider yourself as a witness of this information, a witness, and you're aware that you're totally aware of everything that's going on in your ego. You're totally aware. All the little plans, desires, dreams, disappointments, whatever. And here you are, located at the subject pole. And what happens is because you are plugged into direct source energy, it's like pulling the plug out of the power plant in the lounge room and plugging it into the main switchboard out in the street. You're getting a direct current, undifferentiated flow of intelligent source energy. So to finish off this work, I want to give you the little 3-step formula that an individual can use to put themselves in the position at the subject pole of attention. 3 words are notice, feel, and be. Notice what? Notice that you have this option at any given instant to locate yourself at the subject pole of your attention. Unlike the yoga practices, you don't have to sit down with your legs crossed and close your eyes and be half asleep. You can do it at any given moment. The second step is feel. Notice, feel, and do. Feel. And you understand what you feel? You feel the feeling of feeling awareness itself. How do you do that? We're going to demonstrate this right now by locating the still point of the breath cycle. This is a 3,500-year-old technique of royal yoga. I want you to watch your body breathing itself for the next few seconds. We'll all do it together. Watch your breath going in. Watch your breath going out. This is a quality that's inherent in you. It's built into every individual. It's undeniable. You watch your breath going out. At the end of that out breath, there's a bit of a still point. And then you breathe in again. Let's do it together. You breathe out, and there's that still point at the end of the breath cycle. I want you to breathe in and hold that breath for a moment. And say to yourself, how does it feel at the still point of my breath cycle? Ask yourself, breathe in, hold, and focus on the still point of your breath cycle. You must make this effort to do this, to experience this psychophysical realization. This is spiritual realization. This is it. There's no other way. This is it. Focus on something. Now you might decide to create your own formula. You might say, oh no, what I'll do is I'll just go to work in the morning and I'll focus on the phone. Every time the phone rings, I'll go into that nice, quiet, contemplative state. Whatever you feel is the thing that brings you to the still point of yourself. In this case, we're using the breath cycle. Now, if we breathe in and we hold for a moment, and we breathe out. We hold the end of that breath and ask yourself again, how does it feel at the still point of my breath cycle? This is not a game, this is not a trick. This is a psychophysical reality. How do you feel when you breathe in and hold for a moment? And then you breathe out. Hold for a moment. How do you feel? How do you feel? And most people would say they feel peaceful. It's undeniable. Well, I remind you of the qualities of the soul mind, and those are wisdom, joy, integrity, compassion, mercy, creativity, love, and peace. These are the qualities of the soul. Right? This is not new information. It's 4,000 years old. And that is now part of this new paradigm of knowledge. This organisation is now training people right around the world, on the web, in 52 countries, in 40 different languages on the web. I'll give you some business cards afterwards. You can check it out for yourself. www.sqi.co.
Can I ask one question?
You may
Is
certainly
there
ask
any
one
room
question.
for worshipping God in any of these?
I beg yours?
Is there any room for worshipping God?
This knowledge gives an empowerment to a human being to consider a thing called consciousness. It's been given many, many names over the past 2,000 years.
I know them all. I know them all.
No, we know there's God, Yahweh, Buddha, and Allah, and 1,000 other things. It doesn't interfere with your faith at all. It doesn't interfere with your faith at all.
So you're telling me that once we come to our senses in the sky, they find out in your church and worship God, learn all about it. Actually, God is creating a bit of nothing and it's not existing to us.
Would you like to come over here and ask that question?
I will talk like myself. The question I'm asking is there any room in what you explained to us for worship of our personal God who is the real being of which we remain and who is utterly different from us?
Now, if anybody's got a bomb in their backpack, it's a good time to get rid of it. Because the bomb squad's just arrived. So, put your bombs in your league.
Oh, they come here to try and intimidate you.
Oh, that's good. That's it. So for the benefit of those persons who have been here for the last 15 minutes, I'd like to thank you very, very much. You now have a method. And I want to give you the third step of that method so that you can go away very
Microphone.
quickly. Notice that you've always got this option to stand in the position as a witness at the subject pole of attention. Secondly, feel the feeling of feeling awareness itself by concentrating on the still point of the breath cycle. And the third step is to take a nice big deep breath. Take yourself very deep into that still point and deep. Notice, feel, and deep. Now understand how to experience spiritual intelligence.
I don't think I got an answer to that question.
You can get this on the web. Doesn't matter, God's taking care of it.
Well, it doesn't matter really the answers to everyone.
You've got a bit of difficulty because I'm a little bit hard of hearing. That's why I'm wearing hearing aids. So I'm happy to talk to you anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Our next speaker